Hello, everyone. So I hope you all are doing well. I am here for those of you who are new subscribers because I realize that I have a couple new subscribers. So I just want to take this time to thank you, welcome you to my page. I pray that this channel blesses you and provides you with wisdom, knowledge, and understanding that you can add to your toolbox as you walk with Christ. My name is Orain Williams, and I'm just a humble servant of God doing what he has called me to do. And when I say God, I'm referring to Jesus Christ. I know that there are many gods out there, so I want to be specific when I use the word God. So welcome to my channel. Like I said, I pray that it bless you. I pray that it provides you tools. One of the purpose of this channel is to equip you with tools and revelation and wisdom and understanding so you can navigate your walk with God. You can navigate your relationship with God. You can navigate your communication with God. And you can also heal as a person, as a human being, and also as a spiritual being. So the revelation that I want to bring forth to you, this is a prophetic revelation, not a prophetic word. There's a difference between the two, and I have a video that explains the difference between the two. So this is a prophetic revelation, right? And it's going to be a pretty quick one. I feel like I did it in another video, but the Lord brought it back up to the surface of my spirit, to the surface of my mind, to articulate it again, to revelate it again. So I want to talk to you about how do I start? Knowing thyself. So, and I call it the art of spiritual warfare 101. Hold on a second. God is downloading something in me. I want to receive this. We thank you, Lord. We glorify you. Yes, Lord. Thank you, Lord. So, yeah, I call this revelation, right? I like to call it the art of spiritual warfare 101. And it simply goes like this: know thyself before you know thy enemy. A lot of times where people jump into spiritual warfare and they jump into not just spiritual warfare, they jump into a competition, or they jump into a challenge, or they jump into a debate, or they jump into a spiritual warfare and they don't know themselves. I'm here to encourage you. Know thyself before you know thy enemy. You cannot go in a battle, you cannot go in a challenge, you cannot go in a debate, you cannot go in a spiritual warfare. And I'm going to emphasize a lot on spiritual warfare because that's the focus right here. You cannot go into a spiritual warfare knowing all of the enemy's weakness and don't know your own weakness. The enemy is studying you. The enemy already know you, already know your weakness, and that's why they're an enemy to you. That's why they have launched an attack. Nobody's not going to attack someone that they haven't studied, that they haven't found a weakness, that they haven't found an area, that they haven't found a breach, that they haven't found a weakness in their fort. That's not the art of warfare in real life and in the spiritual realm. You don't attack something or someone if you don't have some level of wisdom or some are privy to some kind of information. So the enemy knows you. The enemy is aware of your weakness. And a lot of times people go into spiritual warfare and they're warring with the enemy and they don't know their weak points. They don't know their weakness. And then on the middle of the battlefield, the enemy hits you somewhere and then you become crippled in the middle of battle. You have to know your weakness. What does that mean? You have to know the things that triggers you. You have to know the things that are going to make you cry. You have to know the things that are going to make you feel depressed. You have to know the things that are gonna make you feel overwhelmed. You're gonna have to know the things that makes you relapse back into sin, or relapse back into temptation, or relapse back into addiction. You have to know your trigger. It's like someone who has gone through rehab because of a substance abuse. One of the things when going into a rehab, it takes you out of the environment that has all the stimulus or the stimuli that triggers you to stay addicted. But when you come out of rehab, you find that people often change their location, change their environment, change even their crowd and their friend, because they don't want to connect with anything that can trigger them again. And that's someone who knows themselves. You have to know thyself before you know your enemy. You cannot spend a lot. I be talking to people sometimes, right? Or people come to me and they're seeking advice, and I'm listening to them, and they're able to outline and tell me everything that the enemy is doing, what the enemy is doing, how the enemy is doing it, how the enemy has attacked them. They're even able to tell me the pattern of the enemy's attack. They're able to say so many different things, and in that discussion, I've yet to hear them say how they're gonna navigate it. What are they gonna do differently? It becomes like a venting session when they're talking about spiritual warfare, and it often breaks my heart. Not that they're venting, because I get that people do need to vent, but I do believe that is not what you vent about, but it's how you vent. Your venting can't always have the narrative of woe is me, and they're doing this, and they're doing this, and they're doing this, and the enemy's doing this, and he attacked me here, and he attacked me there. What is your reinforcement? Like, at some point in your venting, you have to come to a ha-ha moment where the light bulb goes off, and you're able to then come up with solution. That's why I don't really like venting, because how people vent nowadays are the essence of venting doesn't have any solution into it. You're just regurgitating the problem that is bothering you, and then you're dumping it on someone else so you can then feel light for a moment, leaving that person heavy, and then no solution comes from it. So when I see people venting, at some point I will cut them off if they're going on long-winded, and I'll say, okay, so what are you doing? How can you do this differently? So a lot of times I've listened to people when they're going into spiritual warfare, or when they're dealing with spiritual warfare, and they talk about where the enemies attacked them on my health and my family and my this and my that, and he did this, and every 3 a.m. and every 4 p.m. and like they know the pattern of the enemy so well. And it's not bad that you know the pattern of the enemy so well, but do you know your pattern? Do you know your strength? Do you know your weaknesses? Because if you don't know those things, then how can you rebuttal? How can you resist? How can you come back? How can you stand your ground when it comes to the enemy? So you have to know thyself before you know thy enemy. And when I say know thyself, I'm not just referring to knowing your weakness, but it's important to know your weakness, because a lot of people know their strength. Well, this goes vice versa, because a lot of people know their weaknesses and don't know their strength. And there's a lot of people that know their strength and don't know their weaknesses. Like, I think sometimes when you used to do like interviews, everybody asks you, what's your weakness? And you're quick to label out what you're not good at. And when somebody say, what is your strength or what is good about you, you struggle with it. And that's a dangerous place to be in. You want to be grounded in that area where you know well enough your weaknesses and you know well enough your strength. You got to study yourself. You got to be self-awareness. You cannot go into ministry. You cannot go into spiritual warfare. You cannot go into the things of God and not knowing who you are. You have to know thyself more than you know your enemy. That's what makes you win spiritual warfare. Not because you know the enemy more than you know yourself. You have to know yourself more than you know your enemy. Because when you're on the battlefield and something catches you off guard, you have to know how it's going to impact you. But then you also have to know how can you go around it. How can you pick yourself back up from it? Where's your... I often say to people, like, where do you go when you're at your worst? When people say to me, can you be my accountability partner, or can we be friends? And my definition of friends is often different than a lot of people's definition of friends. So everybody's not my friend. You see what I'm saying? Based on my definition. A lot of times we loosely assign people to the wrong place in our life because we don't have any definition. And when I'm talking about definition, I'm talking about relational intelligence. But that's a different topic for a different video if God leads me to do that. But one of the things I ask people that I'm close, I'm like, where can I find you at your worst? When you're at your lowest, when you're at your lowest of your lowest, especially when I'm mentoring somebody, I said, when you're at your lowest, where can I find you? Is it a bar? Is it with a blunt in your hand? Is it with you watching pornography? And sometimes when I say where can I find you, I'm not talking about a physical place, but I'm talking about a mental place, an emotional place. Is it suicide? Is it anger? Where can I find you when you're not at your best? I need to know where I can find my friends when they're not at their best, because I know where they're going to be when they're at their best. You know what I'm saying? So where are you going to be when you're not at your best? And that's my way of allowing myself to know those who are in my circle. A lot of times we establish a tribe, and someone says, oh, can I be a part of your tribe? Can I be a part of your inner circle? And we quickly say yes, and we're not knowing the person who we have just welcomed in our tribe. You also have to know those people who are in your tribe, who you're going to war with, so you know how to help, how to be of support to them, and they need to know you so they know how to be of support to you in spiritual warfare. But that's a different revelation for a different video. I'm talking about you knowing yourself. You need to get to a place where you know yourself. You have to study yourself. You have to be self-aware. No more should you be saying, oh, I feel depressed, and when somebody say why, I don't know, I just feel depressed. Like, that's one of my biggest pet peeve ever. One of my biggest pet peeve is poor communication. And poor communication stem from not being self-aware. Someone who's not truly aware of themselves will never be able to communicate themselves for themselves effectively. I'm not talking about communicate in general, but someone who doesn't know themselves, who's not self-aware, will not be able to communicate themselves for themselves effectively. You have to know yourself. You have to be self-aware. I know what pisses me off. I know what makes me happy. I know my likes and my dislikes. I know what crowd not to be around. I know when I have checked out. When I'm hanging out with people, I always say to them, or when I invite people over and I'm hosting, I always say to them, I say, listen, I have a capacity. I have a check-out point. So usually if I have another good friend around me when I'm hosting in my house or I'm hosting any event, I will let that friend know that you already know my checkpoint, right? So the moment I check out, you need to check in and take over. I know me, I don't have the capacity to be around a group of people for a long period of time. Whether we are very close, whether you're family or friend, I don't know. That's just how my brain is wired. Like after a certain hours, I want to say like after like 5-6 hours, I kind of want you out of my space. I kind of want you off my phone. I kind of need to go back to my realm, just me and me. You see what I'm saying? And I know I'm not an introvert. I don't claim any of that stuff. I'm not an introvert. I'm not an extrovert. That's not a part of my identity. But it's just being aware of myself. I know that about me, and I do communicate that to people. And sometimes I communicate that directly, or sometimes I set limits. Like say, hey, I'm available to hang out from 1 to 6 p.m. or by 5 p.m. I gotta go. So that's me giving you a bunch. So when you see the time coming close, you already know Arain said that he can't go past 5 o'clock. And sometimes I may not have something else to do, but it's just my capacity. I've tapped out. And I don't want you to experience Arain that have tapped out, because then my hospitality is gone. So, and that's nothing bad. That doesn't make me a bad person. Doesn't make you a bad person. You want to know yourself, so you know how to navigate your environment, so you know how to navigate people around you, so you know how to navigate spiritual warfare. You have to be able, one of the things that I learned as I was dealing with spiritual warfare, right? And especially when I was navigating lust, and when this is a good example, and please, you will find that I'm very transparent when it comes to my revelation, because I never want people to think that because someone hears clearly from God, or because they have a YouTube channel, that they're perfect than thou, and they're perfect than everyone else, and that's why God speaks to them directly, and that's why God gives them this revelation, because they have no fault. You'll never get that coming from me. So I believe in transparency. I am the epitome of transparency, and transparency is my foundation. So boom, listen to this, right? There was a time when I was struggling hard with lust. And when I say lust, I'm not just talking about sexual lust. I'm talking about, yes, sexual lust, and I'm also talking about buying clothes, because anything that you do too much of is lust. Also food, like just eating. Like there was a lust for food, there was a lust for buying clothes, there was a lust for there was a sexual lust as well. So I remember when I used to struggle with that a lot, I was just like, yo, why? I'm like, why is this so hard? And then I would get to a point where I overcame this thing and I'm gone months, like not struggling at all. And then I would randomly just fall right back or relapse. And one of the things I do whenever I relapse into anything, I take a step back and I say, what happened? What led me here? You have to ask the right questions, and I'm going to do a video about asking the right questions, right? So I step back and I start asking myself questions like, what happened? How did I get here? Like, I was doing so good. It's been 1 month. It's been a year. It's been 2 years. I even had 2 years and stuff. And I'm like, what's going on? Instead of beating on myself, I asked myself the right question. And one of the things that I learned was just that when my stress level become too high, and it becomes too overwhelming, when my stress level is high, then it's easy for the enemy to tempt me with lust. And it's any lust. I'm talking about shopping, I'm talking about eating, I'm talking about whether it's struggling with masturbation. I learned that and then when in learning that revelation, then the Lord gave me another revelation and said lust is a painkiller. Lust is a painkiller, and until you can address the pain, then you will not stop using the painkiller. So a lot of times you have to learn to attend to the pain that the lust is soothing. A lot of time lust is a painkiller, and that's what that revelation came. I was like, oh, so even though I went 3 years without falling into this thing, the moment I allow stress to get the best of me, it's going to be easy for me to relapse. I caught that. And when I caught that, then what's the next thing that I need to learn how to do? Manage my stress level. Because when I manage my stress level, then I now can maintain my progress out of lust. So when my stress comes around, I'm very mindful of how I'm managing my mind. Like, okay, I'm not going to focus on that. I'm not feeding into that. I'm not allowing that to consume me, because I know what can happen when I allow the stresses of life, or the stressors of life, to get the best of me. It can lead me into a lustful habit, whether it's sexual lust, or lust for shopping, or lust for food. Lust is not just sex. That's why I'm literally just explaining it like that. It's not just sex. So that was one of the way how I learned to know myself. So when I'm in spiritual warfare, or spiritual warfare is coming around me at first, before I engage in any spiritual warfare, before I engage in any battle on behalf of myself or on behalf of someone else, or any battle that the Holy Spirit is leading me into to do, because we know He does lead us into certain things, like He leads us in the wilderness to be tempted. I first check myself. I do a checklist with myself. I do a wellness check. Where's your stress level? Where's your mind? Where's your state of being? Where's your state of thinking? Like, you want to be able to ask yourself the right questions. Questions take you on a quest. That's why it's called question. It takes you on a quest. So the wrong question takes you on the wrong quest. The right question takes you on the right quest. And I'm going to do a video particularly talking about just questions, asking the right questions. So yeah, I think that's the revelation I want to release as it pertains to knowing thyself before you know your enemy. You cannot go into life, you cannot go into ministry, you cannot go into spiritual warfare only knowing your enemy. You have to know you. You have to become self-aware. You have to become aware of self.